You know, if you go back in time, when Brother Malcolm was assassinated, New York had 11 daily newspapers. But from that time to the 1980s, you couldn't read any periodical that mentioned Louis Farrakhan in connection with Brother Malcolm's assassination. But when I arose, Farrakhan was emerging now as a voice for black people, because no other black person was drawing those kinds of crowds. Well, how does the enemy react to that? The young people don't know about the counterintelligence program. Why don't they know? This government and the counterintelligence program of J. Edgar Hoover, since they had no living person to put against me, then they raised my brother from the dead.
Peace and assalamu alaikum, family. This is your brother Malcolm Flex TV. And I'm back with another video. This is part 2 of the weaponization of Malcolm X. The FBI requests advanced copies of the Malcolm X movie script. So I wanted to add to that information. You know, last time we left off and I read the actual FBI documents, and I want to kind of show you all how those documents ended up in the hands of our brother Spike Lee. Okay, and I'm going to read some stuff, so just bear with me, and then I will kind of give an explanation of what I'm reading. Okay, all right. Here's an article right here. Share my screen with you. Called The Ringer. Okay, this article is called The Ringer. This is how Spike Lee and Denzel Washington turned Malcolm X into a Hollywood epic, right? So it's basically explaining, you know, how, you know, this movie came out around the time of the LA riots in the early 90s. Okay? And it was written by K. Austin Collins. And it says, in the aftermath of the LA riots, a determined filmmaker and a brilliant actor overcame budget concerns and voices of dissent to transform the life story of a racial black thinker into a cinematic masterpiece. Right? And they get to explaining how, you know, the history of the LA riots and all that stuff. But the main part that I want to focus on is Spike Lee's battle with, you know, the higher-ups to get the script. Right? Because Spike inherited the script from James Baldwin. Right? He didn't ever get to Louis Lomax's script, and I'll explain why in a minute. But I want to deal with the history on how Spike got the script. Okay, so let me read. Okay, I hope I didn't skip anything. Okay, all right. When Malcolm X landed in theaters nationwide in November 1992, it slimmed down to, hold on, I'm going to go back because y'all don't need to see that, but I just showed y'all. But when Malcolm X landed in theaters nationwide in November 1992, it'd be slimmed down to 3 hours and 22 minutes. It was burdened with weird hype. Everyone heard that Norman Jewison, a respected white Hollywood director who tackled race in his work before, most notably in the Best Picture winner In the Heat of the Night, as well as in the 1984 military drama A Soldier's Story, had originally been hired for the project. Okay, the project was the Malcolm X movie, but the Malcolm X movie was based on the book that was called The Autobiography of Malcolm X. Okay? Now, I said everyone had heard Spike Lee huff and puff in the press over a project of this nature needing a black director. Jewison backed down. That was only the beginning of Lee's fight, though. Really, the fight to make the movie had begun long before he was involved. So remember, I showed you all in the FBI documents how that they had prior knowledge of this movie coming out way back in 1968. Okay, so it says the movie had been begun long before he was involved. The script is based on the autobiography of Malcolm X, as told to Alex Haley, which was published in 1965, merely months after Malcolm X was assassinated. Marvin Wirth, the young producer at that time, bought the rights from Haley and Malcolm X's widow, Betty Shabazz, in 1967. Wirth would go on to carve out a unique career for himself in Hollywood, producing the 1974 Lenny Bruce biopic Lenny and the Bret Easton Ellis adaptation Less Than Zero. Had special insight here. He'd known Malcolm back in Detroit in the 1940s when they were both teenagers, and Malcolm, who was in those days went by Detroit Red on account of his fiendishly red hair and was selling drugs. He was 16 or 17 but looked older, Wirth told the New York Times. He was very witty, a funny guy, and he had this extraordinary charisma, a great dancer and a great dresser. He was very good looking, very, very tall. Girls always noticed him. He was quite a special guy. The earliest version of the script was written in the late 60s by James Baldwin, who quickly became disillusioned by Hollywood, particularly with some of the changes requested by higher-ups. Who are these higher-ups? I think I showed you who they were in the FBI documents. To resist politicizing Malcolm's life-changing trip to Mecca, for example, and to downplay his being portrayed by white people throughout his life in favor of emphasizing the extent to which he was controversial among blacks. Baldwin's script, such as it was revised by Arnold Pearl. Baldwin's script, such as it was revised by Arnold Pearl. Why was that? Who was Arnold Pearl to revise James Baldwin's script? Could he have been one of those sources that was connected to the FBI? A screenwriter who'd been blacklisted during the McCarthy era. It was sold to Warner Brothers, where the project languished for years. How many years? From 1968 to 1992, you do the math. Attracting writers, directors, and stars as far-flung as David Mamet, Sidney Lumet, and Eddie Murphy. It finally got some traction with Jewison, then Kane Lee, who revised the Pearl Baldwin script to suit his own needs. Pearl remains credited as a co-screenwriter. Baldwin's estate had his name removed due to the numerous changes made to his original conceit. So the actual original script had been changed and revised as much as the King James Version of the Bible. Okay, by the time Lee got his hands on the project, okay, so a lot of people think that he wrote and produced it, but no, he did not. He produced it, but he didn't write it. But he revised it from the original writing. By the time Lee got his hands on the project, there had been a slew of successful biopics, or at least historical dramas based on real people, including epics like Richard Attenborough's Gandhi, okay, and Bernardo Bertolucci's The Last Emperor, and Oliver Stone's JFK. Lee wanted to follow suit with a project spanning multiple decades and movie styles to be shot in a handful of locations across the world, including the apartheid-stricken Soweto, South Africa. it would capture the full evolution of a richly complicated man, which sounds expensive because it was Warner Brothers thought so too, that it was very expensive to make. There were drawn out fights between Lee and the studios, and then between Lee and the Bond company putting up the money. It eventually got dire enough that Lee had to call on black celebrities such as Oprah Winfrey, sellout, and Bill Cosby to help him foot the bill, giving him more control over the direction of the movie. It came in at $34 million, Lee told Roger Ebert at the time, which is what I thought it had cost. Okay, so it was very expensive to even just put the movie out, right? And he had to lobby for funding for this movie, right? But let's look at why he wasn't able, why he never got his hands on the Lomax's script. Because some things had taken place with Lomax. Because the original Lomax script was supposed to be called Malcolm X, and the original James Baldwin script was supposed to be called The Autobiography of Malcolm X, after the book, The Autobiography of Malcolm X. But they took the Autobiography of Malcolm X script and called the movie Malcolm X, because Louis Lomax's movie never came out. All right. So this was sent to me by Dr. Ridgely Muhammad. Shout out to Dr. Ridgely. Then there's Louis Lomax. I'm reading from an email that he sent me, but I also saw it in another article as well. He said, then there's Louis Lomax's To Kill a Black Man, first published in 1968. 2 years before Lomax's own death in a car accident, okay, as both a faithful friend to Malcolm and a writer wired to what was happening, Lomax already pointed out to a solution to Malcolm's assassination. I said I have 5 guides. The last 2 are Malcolm X and the man who lived to tell his tale, Alex Haley, right? So there is theories that Louis Lomax was assassinated by the FBI because of some claims that he was making to an alleged agent who was placed within the Nation of Islam to cause division. And the FBI had warned him, and all of a sudden, his steering power went out while he was driving, and he died in a car accident. As the theories go. As the theories go, that the FBI killed this brother and made it look like it to be an accident, right? So it says, in the autobiography of Malcolm X is the transforming work of both. Haley in his epilogue hints at what Malcolm in his last days realized and was on the verge of shouting. That it was the government, not Elijah Muhammad, and Malcolm's African connection, not his Nation of Islam rejection, that were the primary agent and motivation behind the plot. That it was the government and Malcolm's connection to Africa is what got him ultimately assassinated. Okay? And some say that it was by the capitalists who runs the country, because Malcolm was getting ready to go out their pockets. Same reason why Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, because he was getting ready to call for an all-out boycott against white businesses. Right? He was messing up America's bottom line. This is what Malcolm was getting ready to do, especially in Africa where they are colonized and the enemy controls most of the resources over there. Okay? So it says, Malcolm is the ultimate guide to understanding his own murder. In a memorandum written 4 years after Malcolm's death, the special agent in charge of the FBI Chicago office stated that over the years, considerable thought has been given and action taken with Bureau's approval relating to the methods through which the Nation of Islam could be discredited in the eyes of the general black populace. So what are some of the methods that they are using to discredit the Nation of Islam in the eyes of the general black populace? Well, could it be through Hollywood? Through the use of propaganda? Creating stories using actual people, but they are fictionalizing the stories to get a dramatic effect, right? So throughout this whole Malcolm X stuff that's going on online in 2019, right? Everybody who believes that the Nation of Islam, right, killed Malcolm X are really victims, and they were targeted by the FBI specifically to turn them against the Nation of Islam. Because too many say, oh yeah, we all know that it was the Nation of Islam working with the FBI. See, now first it was just the Nation of Islam, but now they trying to get conscious and say it was the Nation of Islam working with the FBI. But it's the Nation of Islam that's really revealing the FBI's nefarious plot, not only against the Nation of Islam, but against black people in general. You know, why did we run the devil from the root of civilization 2,200 miles into Europe? It's because he came among the righteous people telling lies and caused them to kill one another and shed each other's blood. You know? That's why we got to go back to the lesson that the white man is the devil, because he came among the righteous people telling lies and caused the righteous people to shed and kill one another, shed each other's blood and kill one another. And this is what he did. And I'll keep reading. It says, over the years, considerable thought has been given and action taken with the Bureau's approval relating to methods through which the Nation of Islam could be discredited in the eyes of the general populace, or through which factionalism, creating division. This is how the enemy is able to continuously rule over us, through our division in religion, in politics, gangs, theology, in every aspect of life. The enemy is able to rule us because of our division. But behind closed doors, they sticking together. They make it look like in politics, Republican and Democrats, that they beefing in public, but behind closed doors, they keeping their family tight. All right? It says, or through which factionalism among the leadership could be created. Factional disputes have been developed, the most notable being Malcolm X Little. Right? I'm showing y'all that this is the weaponization of Brother Malcolm against not just the Nation of Islam, but black people. See, y'all got to stop looking at it as this attack is just on the nation. An attack on the nation is an attack on black people. The FBI developed the factional dispute that led to Malcolm's death by first placing at least one of his people high within Chicago headquarters of the Nation of Islam. Its infiltrator then worked to widen a division between Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X. To the FBI's alarm, this process was inadvertently described and the FBI man identified in the 1964 book When the Word is Given, written by Lomax. In the paragraph that gave away the FBI's game, Lomax began observing that Elijah Muhammad had moved from Chicago to Phoenix, Arizona for the sake of his health. Lomax then described a significant shift of power. Elijah, he said, had delegated his Chicago office not only the Nation of Islam finances and administration, but also the responsibility for turning out the movement's publications and overall statements, thus taking away from Malcolm X his critical control over the Nation of Islam's flow of information. At one time carried some of these responsibilities, particularly the publishing of the Muslim newspaper, and many observers thought they saw an intra-organizational fight when these responsibilities were taken from him and given to Chicago. The thing that dismayed the FBI most was the paragraph's final sentence, which disclosed a hidden factor in this abrupt transfer of power away from Malcolm. The sentence stated that this decision by Muhammad was made possible because of John X, a former FBI agent and perhaps the best administrative brain in the movement, was shifted from New York to Chicago. Lomax's sentence about John X, a former FBI agent, quote unquote, set off alarm bells in FBI counterintelligence, especially in the office of William C. Sullivan. Assistant FBI Director Sullivan was in charge of the illegal counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, designed to develop a factional dispute between Elijah and Malcolm. Sullivan was a high-level commander of covert action. Among his projects was an all-out FBI campaign aimed at neutralizing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as an effective Negro leader, as Sullivan put it in a December 1963 memorandum. On March 20th, 1964, COINTELPRO Chief Sullivan was alerted by an airtail from the FBI Seattle field office to the objectionable passage in When the Word is Given by Lomax. The hardcover edition of the book had been published late 1963, only a few months before what Sullivan must have regarded as a COINTEL success story. Malcolm's March 8, 1964 announcement of his split with Elijah Muhammad. Right? We giving y'all a timeline. The problem was that to a discerning reader of both the Lomax paragraph and the news of the split, the FBI could be recognized as a key disruptive factor. John X. Ali Simmons announcing Malcolm X's suspension from the Nation of Islam. An FBI official recommended in a memorandum to Sullivan that the New York office should be instructed to contact Lomax to advise him concerning the inaccurate statement contained in his book regarding John X. Ali Simmons, and that he be instructed to have this statement removed from any future printings of the book. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover added his personal okay to this recommendation. Lomax, however, ignored the FBI's pressure as well as John Ali's anger at his having made that statement. He never retracted it. In his later book, To Kill a Black Man, he repeated it and said that John Ali knew it was true. In the 6 years leading to his death, Lomax never clarified what he meant by the term former FBI agent. He may have been giving Ali the benefit of a doubt as to his having severed his FBI connection by the time Lomax mentioned it in 1964. In any case, the FBI had other informants in the Nation of Islam to take his place. Wallace Muhammad, Elijah Muhammad's independent-minded son, also believed that FBI informants were manipulating Nation of Islam headquarters at that time. Malcolm and Elijah became antagonists. The FBI had key persons in the national staff, at least one or two maybe. They were preparing for the death of Elijah Muhammad in terms of determining his successor. I believe that the members of the Nation of Islam were influenced to do the things that they were doing, not just by the national staff and my father, but also by the intelligence department. Wallace was in a position to know at first hand the FBI's process of working with Nation of Islam informants. The FBI considered him one of them. Carl Evans, in researching his biography of Elijah Muhammad entitled The Messenger, discovered from FBI documents that in addition to John Ali, at least 3 other people were regarded by FBI agents as reliable sources close to Muhammad. The first man was Abdul Basit Naeem, a Pakistani journalist who served as a Nation of Islam publicist. Then there's Hassan Sharif, Elijah Muhammad's grandson, and Wallace Muhammad. Evans concludes that the FBI thought Wallace and Hassan fit the bill because they had provided the Bureau with information it considered crucial to inciting violence between Muhammad's camp and Malcolm X's camp. Wallace's and Hassan's reasons for taking the FBI seem to have been simply to seek protection from members of their own family who threatened to kill them for going against Elijah. The FBI then recycled the information for its own use in plotting against Malcolm and Elijah. Quote from Wallace Muhammad: I believe that the members of the Nation of Islam were influenced to do the things that they were doing, not just by the national staff and my father, but also by the intelligence department. It was Louis Lomax's revelation of the FBI's covert process within the Nation of Islam that so concerned the Bureau. Lomax's statement had given his readers a glimpse into a critical part of the FBI's COINTELPRO strategy to divide and destroy the Nation of Islam, thereby silencing as well its most powerful voice, Malcolm X. Okay? FBI documents show that the Bureau had been monitoring Malcolm X as far back as 1950 when he was still in prison. The Bureau began to focus special attention on Malcolm X in the 1950s when it realized he had become Elijah Muhammad's intermediary to foreign revolutionaries. From Malcolm's Harlem base of operations as the minister of the Nation of Islam's Temple No. 7, he was meeting regularly at the United Nations with third world diplomats. In 1957, Malcolm met in Harlem with visiting Indonesian President Ahmed Sukarno, whom the CIA had targeted for removal from power. Sukarno was extremely impressed by Malcolm. As early as 8 years before Malcolm's death, the FBI and CIA were watching the subversive international connections Malcolm was making. Okay, so just to sum it all up, okay, I believe possibly that Louis Lomax was assassinated for revealing high critical sources within the FBI who was transmitting information out of the Nation of Islam to the enemy. Okay, and he was revealing that. Okay, and he was also writing a movie script, according to the FBI. Okay, he was writing a movie script, and the FBI wanted to get advanced copies of not only the autobiography of Malcolm X's script written by James Baldwin that in turn fell into the hands of Spike Lee, but they also want Louis Lomax's script, right, to protect the image and the credibility of the FBI. And all of a sudden, a few years later, Louis Lomax is killed and assassinated. Okay? So that's highly important that we have to take into consideration, okay, that the FBI involvement with Hollywood and the making of movies and the portrayal of their enemy, us, the Nation of Islam, and their own portrayal of their own image. They wanted it to be favorable to them, and they don't want to reveal the dirty tactics and strategies that they were using against black organization back during the time of civil rights. Okay, so this is your brother Malcolm Flex TV. I just wanted to do a quick part 2 and lay that information out there and add to my information. Peace and assalamu alaikum.
If you go back in time, when Brother Malcolm was assassinated, New York had 11 daily newspapers. But from that time to the 1980s, you couldn't read any periodical that mentioned Louis Farrakhan in connection to Brother Malcolm's assassination. But when I arose, Farrakhan was emerging now as a voice for black people because no other black person was drawing those kinds of crowds. Well, how does the enemy react to that? The young people don't know about the counterintelligence program. Why don't they know? The U.S. government and the counterintelligence program of J. Edgar Hoover, since they had no living person to put against me, then they raised my brother from the dead.